What if you're looking to become a CISO and you haven't had a lot of success? What if you brainstormed every day for 30 minutes on what new creative ways or things you could do to be able to get your first job as a CISO? Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, and a few more welcomes. Hopefully, you know what time it is. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. It is a new year. We finished up 2022, and we are starting 2023, depending on when you listen to this, but super pumped. And what I really want to do on this episode is really sort of look back. You can learn a lot from the past. Now, you shouldn't live in the past, right? You got to let the past go, but you should learn from it, extract the lessons that you need to know in a cybersecurity sense, and then apply that as we move forward into 2023. I'll give you a little hint. If things keep repeating themselves, if you sort of have the same challenges and the same problems or the same things keep reoccurring over and over and over again, the reason that's happening is you didn't learn the lesson, right? Once you learn the lesson, that will go away. It will no longer happen and no longer occur. Think of life like a video game, that you stay at a level until you master it. And then once you master that level, you can move to the next level, but you have to learn the lessons at that level in order to advance. So it's the same thing in life. So if you continue to have trouble with your boss, or you continue to have trouble with an executive or with the CIO or the CISO or somebody like that, step back and look at all the data and say, what is the lesson that I can learn here? Maybe I need to listen more. Maybe I need to ask better questions. Maybe I need to better understand the perspective that they're coming from. But the point is, if you continue to have a problem and you continue to handle it the same way, you'll continue to have the same outcome, right? So that's actually one of the powerful reasons why you want to have a coach. Coaches can see things you can't see. They can look at your life from a objective standpoint and basically be able to provide things that you are not aware of. The problem when we evaluate our own lives is we're very biased, right? We only see what we want to see. But here's the coolest part. All the answers to all of your problems are inside you. You just have to do a better job of listening and looking for them. So, I always like to start with a little story, a little motivation, right, to get things going. So this one is taken from Acres of Diamond. You might have even read the story or the short story, but essentially, I'm going to paraphrase. Remember, all my stories are fictional based on facts, right? So this way, if I get some pieces wrong, you can give me some poetic liberties on that front. But the way the Acre of Diamonds work is there was a gentleman that had a 20-acre farm. And there was a stream that ran through his farm. And one day, he heard about people finding diamonds and making millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. And he decided that he wanted to be very, very rich. So he decided that he was going to go and search for diamonds. And he was going to find diamonds, and it was going to make him hundreds of millions of dollars. So he sold his farm, and he went off. And years after years after years of searching for diamonds, he could not find them. and he was exhausted, and he was worn out, and finally gave up and took his own life. Now, if we backtrack, the person that he sold the farm to, that bought his 20-acre farm, one day was walking down by the river that flowed through the property and saw this magnificent purple rock in the river. And there was a bunch of them, so he took the biggest one and he put it on his mantle over his fireplace. He just thought it was a pretty looking rock and didn't think much of it. Several months later, a friend of his comes over and looks at the mantle and says, "Whoa, where did you get that from?" And he goes, "Oh, that rock? That rock I just got outside." He says, No. That's not a rock. That is one of the biggest uncut diamonds that I have ever seen." He said, "Do you know how much that's worth?" He goes, "That's probably one of the largest diamonds that is out there. That's worth millions upon millions of dollars." And the guy's eye get really big and goes, "Really? My entire river is full of these. This just happened to be one of the large ones, but there's hundreds of these diamonds, right, in this river." And it turned out that 20 acres turned into one of the largest diamond mines ever discovered in the world. And it's actually since yielded not millions or hundreds of millions, but billions of dollars of diamonds. Now, the lesson that hopefully you've all picked up on, but I'll point it out to be obvious, is this man who owned the 20 acres, he had diamonds on his own property, but he never bothered to look. He was so focused on external. He was so focused on looking external to solve his problem that he never looked on his own property. And if he actually spent a little time and a little energy looking at his own property, he would have realized that the diamonds he was searching for that he never found was actually his all along. He just never bothered to look. And of course, the analogy is the diamonds are inside of you. The answers to all of your problems, you have. They are fully available to you whenever you decide. You ready? You ready? I'm going to throw some power down. Whenever you are ready to listen. The problem with security professionals and CISOs when I work with them is we are so busy doing work and putting out fires and solving problems that we never, ever stop long enough to actually listen. If we actually took time to listen every day, the diamonds are within you. You just have to take the time to mine them. All the answers to your problems are not external. They're not going to come from others. People always come to me, "Eric, I want to hire you as a coach because you're going to tell me what to do." And I'm like, nope. If you're coming to me for me to tell you what to do, I don't want you as a client because I am not your savior, right? I don't have the answers. But what I do as a coach, and I do very, very well, is I ask you questions and strategically navigate you to find those diamonds within you quicker and faster than you ever could on your own. So I basically tell you, don't sell the farm. Don't go and look elsewhere. Walk down to the river and look here, here, and here, and you will find the answers. That's what brilliant coaches do. Brilliant coaches just take somebody and help them find what their inner strengths are, what their superpowers are, and show them how to use them as effectively as possible. Now, yes, you, of course, can do that on your own. You can ask yourself whatever questions you want. But like I said, a lot of people have difficulty seeing the internal. They're so busy looking externally. So I'm going to give you a simple, powerful tool that when I first say it, you're going to think I'm crazy. But if you've been watching me for any amount of time, you probably already know I'm a little crazy. Crazy is good, right? And somebody come up to me and go, dude, you are like the weirdest, craziest person I've ever met. I'm like, thank you. And they paused and they were like, Eric, I don't know if I actually meant that as a compliment or not. I'm like, trust me, normal is overrated. I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you. Right? And I walked away from them and they sort of looked all confused because I don't think they expected that reaction from me. But the point is, try it. As with anything I teach you, try it for 10 days. You got to try it more than a day because you got to get used to it. The first couple times it's going to be weird. But let me ask you a question. I'm asking for 30 minutes a day for 10 days. 5 hours. If you could change the trajectory of your career, if you could change how you approach your job as a CISO or soon to be CISO, and that can happen in 5 hours, is that worth the investment? I will tell you, over 10 days, you spend 5 hours wasting a lot more time. Whether it's on social media or watching TV or sports or any other things that are out there. Nothing wrong with that. But I want you to make a commitment starting tomorrow. Well, if you're listening to this in the morning, you could do it today. But for the next 10 days, I want you to go into your calendar right now, and I want you to block out 30 minutes. Every day, block out a 30-minute period, and I want you to call it thinking time. And essentially, during that 30 minutes, you set a timer. So when you start, you set the 30-minute timer. And during those 30 minutes, you do not check email. You do not check text. You do not check social media. You do not check anything. It's you and a piece of paper. And for 30 minutes, you think. And the question is, well, what do you think about? Well, what is the current problem you have? What is the current challenge that you're dealing with? And basically, you're in a brainstorming session with yourself. For 30 minutes, you are going to brainstorm all the possible options or all the possible ways that you can solve this issue. Now, imagine if you're on the entrepreneurial side and you're running your own company. What if your question was, what new product or service can I offer that would generate X amount of revenue per month? Right? Depending on where you are, it could be $100K a month, it could be $1 million, right? Depending on where you are in the growth cycle. But what if you spent several hours brainstorming with yourself on ideas for doing that? What if you're looking to become a CISO and you haven't had a lot of success? What if you brainstormed every day for 30 minutes on what new creative ways or things you could do to be able to get your first job as a CISO? It's focused, dedicated time with you, right? You're spending time with yourself, thinking about a problem and going deep inside to look for revelations and answers. Now, I will tell you, in the beginning, it's going to feel weird. In the beginning, you're going to want to fight it, but I'll give you the simple rule. Keep the pen moving. Whatever thoughts you have, write them down. Right? It doesn't mean you have to execute them, but here's the trick. If you start self-evaluating and saying, this is a bad idea, that's a bad idea, you're basically telling your unconscious mind, hey, I don't like your idea, stop. But if every idea is a good idea, it just might be different, unique, or unusual, just write it down. if you keep the pen moving for 30 minutes, you will start to find the diamonds that are inside of you. And the reason why I have you do it for 10 days is, first couple days, it's going to take a little getting used to. Some people, their first session, they just knock it out and get all the answers. But it also varies. Some days, you're going to get much better insights than others. Some days, you're going to get a lot. Other days, not so much. But the point is to consistently do it. And then you work up. So I actually do every day, I do 45 minutes of thinking time. And on weekends, I do 60 minutes. And you would be amazed at what you come up with, because your mind wants to be creative, but you're not giving it the time to be creative. You're so focused on putting out fires. You're so focused at go, 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 go. You're not stepping back, taking a deep breath and saying, okay, what are some different ways I could solve this problem? So definitely encourage you to start doing some thinking time. So now shifting to looking back over the last 12 months. If we look back over the last 12 months from a cybersecurity perspective, what are some of the big takeaways that we can learn as a CISO? The first one is, let's fix the root cause problem. Let's figure out what the real issue and the real challenge is, and actually start implementing those types of solutions. And let me explain what I'm referring to. When we kicked off 2022, about 12 months ago, the big thing on everyone's plate was ransomware, ransomware, ransomware. Now, what is the symptom of ransomware? That your data is not backed up, right? That you don't actually have a backup of your data. So if somebody breaks in, a cyber criminal breaks in and encrypts all of your data, and you don't have a backup, your only option to get it back is to pay the ransom. So the symptom of the problem was you didn't have a backup. So what did many companies do in the first 2 quarters of 2022? They implemented backup solutions. They put backup in place and ways to be able to recover their data. Now, people always go, but Eric, seriously? How in the world do these hospitals and banks and other entities not have any backups? No, no, no. The problem is they confused replication with backup. So starting about 4 or 5 years ago, organizations started saying, wait a second. Why are we backing up to tape or offsite storage or things like that? When that takes time, we have to store all the data, everything else. We have multiple offices. Why don't we replace backups with replication? So now, when a server in New York gets updated, it automatically replicates to Chicago, California, Singapore, and Europe, or the UK. So now your data is self-replicated in 5 locations. So essentially, they felt that took care of the backup. Because now if a data center or something happens, or even a catastrophic event, the data centers are far enough geographically that the data is still preserved and protected. So technically, they were doing real-time replication, which is a subcategory of backups. The problem is, that's exactly what ransomware exploited. It took advantage of that replication. So an attacker knew this and knew that if they went in and they took one of the servers in the replication cluster and they corrupted the data, encrypted the data, 3, 2, 1, boom, it would self-replicate to all the other servers and all the data would be held hostage. So it was actually the strength that they turned against them into a weakness. So a lot of organizations started going back to doing old school backups, where they still backed up the tape every night. They still did full and incremental and differential backups. So now, when the attacker came and corrupted the data and it replicated, they said, no problem. We're just going to take our tapes, restore it, and be back in business. So about halfway through last year, 2022, ransomware was becoming less and less effective, and you saw less and less ransomware in the news because companies were treating the symptom of fixing the backup problem. Why do I keep saying symptom? What was the real problem with ransomware? An attacker got into your network and was able to access your data. There was a vulnerability that was exploited that allowed the attacker in. But instead of companies 12 months ago addressing that issue and fixing the problem so the attacker could not get in, they focused on, let's just back up our data. Let's just back up our data so the ransomware component doesn't work. Now, unfortunately, we're dealing with some pretty clever attackers out there. They're pretty darn smart. So what do you think they did? They shifted about halfway through the year to extortion attacks. Now they're like, okay. We know if we go in and we do ransomware, you have backups. We also know there's regulation that's being pushed that you can't pay ransom and you have to disclose it and all these other factors. So the attacker's like, now we're going to break in, and instead of encrypting your data, we're just going to copy it. We're then going to give you a small sample to show you we have it. And if you don't pay the extortion, we're going to publicly disclose your information. And then you're going to suffer fines, penalties, reputation, lost customers, and everything else, which is often far exceeds the amount of the extortion payment. So that's why you've seen in the last couple of months, not a lot of news stories on cybersecurity, not a lot of news stories on ransomware, because it's now covert. Ransomware attacks are overt. If I hold your data ransom and you can't access it, everybody knows, right? Because they can't get to your servers. They can't provide the service. So it's a very overt style of an attack that people are very, very aware of. But when we switch to extortion, it becomes covert. It's between you and the attacker. Nobody else has to know. Nobody is aware. There's no disclosures. There's no embarrassment, right? There's none of that stuff that happens because you can silently pay the extortion. Couple of problems. First problem is they're in your network and they have your data. So you pay extortion payment one. What stops the attacker from coming back a month later and saying, oh, by the way, that $100K that you paid, that was a monthly subscription. You now have to pay us $100K a month, or the data is going to be publicly disclosed. So now it's sort of that old style New York City mafia, right, where they used to go to the store owners and have them pay for protection, right, that they didn't really need because they had the protection in the first place, but they had to pay monthly reoccurring fees, or they would come in and destroy or burn down their stores. So now we're seeing the old school move to cyber, and they're doing that same style extortion payment. But the reality for a CISO is this: how did they get in? We have to stop focusing on the symptom and focus on the root cause. How are they able to get into our network? How are they able to get to our critical data? And how are they able to exploit it? That's what world-class CISOs need to do. The big lesson from 2022 is moving into 2023. World-class CISOs must become obsessed with their data. Start asking these simple questions. What is our critical data? What is it worth? And where is it located? and how are we protecting and securing from somebody to get access to it. Now, this, to do it correctly, does require you to build up proper communication with the executives and make them aware of the problems. Here's why. Who is the only person in the company that can honestly prioritize the criticality of the data for the entire organization? The executives. If you go to the head of HR and you ask them, what is the critical data? They're going to say HR data. If you go to head of engineering and say, what is the critical data? They're going to say engineering data. And if you go to the head of sales, they're going to say the sales data. So if you want a true, honest assessment, you need to go to the executives. This is the involvement that CEO, COO, CFO must have in effective, healthy cybersecurity programs. They must spend the time to sit with the CISO and say, let's prioritize our data. What is the first most critical piece of data to our organization? What is the second? What is the third? Then, what is that information worth to us? Not only in revenue, but how long would it take to replicate it? How much money would we lose if that data was not available? What would be the fines or negative impacts if that data became public? What would be the reputational damage or the number of customers that we would lose if that data was publicly available? Those are the questions we need to ask. Now remember, you are estimating. Here's the problem. Security professionals get so wound up that they want an exact numeric value, but it's not. You're looking for a general number of zeros. So I was working with a client on doing this exercise, and they called me and said, Eric, this is impossible. We have the 5 top people in our organization, and we've asked them, what is the value of this data? If it wasn't available, if it was lost, it was not there. And one said 4 million, one said 6.2 million, one said 5 million. And we cannot agree. I said, great. It's now multiple choice. Is that data, if it was not available, exposed, all those pieces together, would it cost you $50,000, $500,000, $5 million, $50 million? Every one of them said, oh, definitely 5 million. I'm like, great. We go with 5 million. And then not even a second passing, but Eric, it's like, stop. Don't tell me it's off by an error of 5 or 10%. I don't care. What I care about are a number of zeros. Whether it's 4 million, 5 million, or 6 million, that's not relevant. The relevancy is it's around 5 mil. That's what's important. So stop wasting time trying to come up with an exact number where an exact number doesn't exist. And then once you have that number, you then look at what are the different threats to that data, and then you determine what is the reasonable budget that you should spend to protect data that's worth $5 million. Notice the entire shift. We're changing how we approach cybersecurity and how we determine the budget that's needed. Notice how much different this is. If you go to an executive team and they say, Eric, what is your budget for the year? And you say 2 million. And they say, no, you got 1.5. You're like, but then I can't do this. They're like, Eric, figure it out. But the most we're giving you is this. Come close. Come close here. Can we be honest? That is an illogical way of doing things. It makes no sense. We're randomly coming up with numbers that have no tie back to reality. What if we did it differently? What if we went back to the execs and said, okay, we want to spend $300K to protect data that's worth 5 million. We want to spend $100K to protect data that's worth 2 million. We want to, and you present it that way. Now, if they come back and say, no, you can't have 2 million, you only have 1.5, go, great. Where do you want us to shave? Which data do you want us to have less protection against? Because I showed you the numbers based on the value of the data. So if you're telling us that you want us to spend 500K, we're pushing it back on you. Where do you want to take the risk? which data do you want to put at risk and not implement proper security against? It changes everything. Now, just so we're clear, you are going to get some pushback whenever you do a paradigm shift, and executives don't like it because here's why. They like the old way where they came up with a random number and it was your problem. If the company got breached, it was your problem. They gave you some money. But now that you're actually tying the money to the value of the data to the risk profile, they're now involved in both the problem and the solution. So now if they say they want to shave $500K,